Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tacticalbassin. Today we're talking about lipless crankbaits and the often overlooked blade bait for springtime bass fishing. We're talking about how you can take these two styles of baits and catch more and bigger fish this spring. If you guys missed our last video, you're going to want to go back and check that out. And I'll link it down in the video description for you. But in that video, I took this bait right here and for about a solid hour, just massacred the bass. Springtime bass will eat a blade bait and they will eat a lipless. We all know that. Applying those baits takes a little bit of know-how. Of course, you can go down the bank, just chucking and winding, just catching fish. But you can also get out there, like we've talked about in the past, slow fish those baits, work them on the bottom, and you can catch giant bass. The question is, one, how do you want to fish it? And two, which baits do you use? Because it's not the same baits per se for chucking and winding as it is for bottom hopping. Then of course you need to know when and why to do it in the first place. So if you missed that video, you should check that out. But that video brought this video on. I thought it was prime time to talk about how to take a blade bait and a lipless and apply those to your springtime bass fishing. Let's start with the blade bait because that's more of the mystery. But there are 6 boxes of baits here that I'm going to narrow down for you today and really try to make this as simple as possible when you come out the other end. I want you guys going out on the water with confidence, knowing that you can apply these baits to your fishing and it will make a huge difference. Actually, you know what? We're gonna set this down. We're gonna start on the lipless side. Now, I think what I'm gonna do first, a lot of people, we talk about this from time to time, don't enjoy going down the rabbit hole. They don't need all the information. So with that in mind, I'm going to pick out one bait for bottom hopping and one bait just for chucking and winding and covering water. We'll talk about those first and then we're gonna go down the rabbit hole. So for hopping bottom, that one's easy. It's this guy right here. This is a Lucky Craft LV 500, color is Ghost Minnow. If I could only have one bait nationally for going down the bank, throwing it out, letting it go to bottom, slow fishing, like a jig on the bottom, it would be that LV. Although there are some additions that are amazing. But again, if I could only have one, that bait, that color, that's the one. Now for chucking and winding, for covering water, see what we've got around here. It's so hard, man. So many good baits. I, though, think, let's go to the budget end of the spectrum, all right? One bait, it's going to be just a simple cotton cordell super spot. Just chucking and winding. Those spots are such shallow running baits. They're a cheap bait. They're really cheap. You can get them almost anywhere. Basic colors. They're loud and they fish really shallow. They don't sink very quickly. So if you're throwing right up on the bank and burning that thing back to you, that is a bait that will just flat get it done. I've thrown it for bass. I've thrown it in South America for all sorts of crazy species. That super spot just plain catches them. And it's not going to break the bank. So just 2 baits. If I had to pick bottom hopping and rolling down the bank, those are them. Now, with that said, we've got boxes and boxes of baits to go through because they all have applications. So let's talk about the bottom hopping thing too, because bottom hopping, really, we can combine the blade bait, as you guys just saw in that last video, and the lipless together. Bottom hopping is something very unique. When fish move up in the spring, those males move right up on the bank. They're going to spawn. They're going to start that process first. The females, they hang back just a little bit, usually one spot behind the males. So if the males have moved all the way to the back of the pocket, the females are probably on the first secondary point out from them. Or if the males pop up onto the shallow flat, the females might be right there sitting on the break, okay? Those fish tend to bunch up, and taking a rattle bait, taking a lipless, letting it go to bottom, and then just slow working it. It vibrates, it makes a bunch of racket, and then it falls. Bunch of racket, and it falls. Until it's worked for you, it sounds like the silliest thing in the world that that's what you would do. I'm telling you, it catches numbers, it catches absolute giants. It is incredible how well it works. But you need very specific baits to do it. Boxes and boxes of baits here for cover and water. Not that many for bottom hopping. 2 dedicated boxes though for bottom hopping. One is LV500s, Lucky Craft LV500. That's where that ghost minnow came from. And the other is the Jackal TN70s. That's these guys. Let me pull one of them out, or 2 of them out. Those 2 baits, an LV500 and a Jackal TN70, are not just the best baits, they're the baits that I will do it with. I don't do it with any other lipless. The reason why is that both of those baits, for their size, let me see if I can get one out of here. All right. Both of these baits, for their size, are very fast sinking. There's another LV, that's American Shad. There's a TN70 for you. See how their profiles are very, very similar? They're both really, really heavy. That is the key to bottom hopping. The bait has to have a lot of weight and a small profile. The reason why is that when you pull it up, you want it to crash back to bottom. It's literally a reaction strike. If the bait glides back to bottom, if it goes down slow, it just does not work the same. They're not as aggressive. They don't pursue it as hard. You want that bait that you lift up it comes, and then slams back down. Up it comes, slams back down. The other thing is that a lot of the lighter baits will tend to like twirl in the water, and they'll hook the front hook when they go to drop. So you'll throw it out, you might get a good clean hop or 2, and then all of a sudden it's fouled up. And that'll happen over and over and over. Those baits are not for bottom hopping. These 2 baits are what you're bottom hopping with. Now, with the Lucky Craft, the LV500 is the bait. Not the LVRs, not the LVR D7 or the D10, not the LV300s. They've made like 15 varieties that come and go. Sometimes they're discontinued, sometimes they're back. Just the LV500, one size. That's the one. What's nice about the Jackal, let me close that box up. What's nice about the Jackal is that this is the 70. This is a 60. Okay. And this is the little 50. And essentially, all 3 of them can do it. Now, you'll use a little bit lighter gear. Obviously, you won't throw the 50 on really heavy tackle, right? You go to a much lighter rod, softer, smaller pole, but all 3 sizes can do it. Again, I will always start with the TN70. I want that heavier bait. I want that larger profile. I want it crashing back to bottom. But you can do it with any of them. If you're on a fishery with smaller fish, if the fish are dirt shallow, you want that smaller bait up in there, you can do it. With that LV, just the 500. Now also color comes into play, but essentially those ghostier type colors are always where we start. There's basically three things that we bottom hop with. If you've got a bait that is ghost, a bait that is flashy, and a bait that is bold, you're in business. I won't go into specifics, okay, but something, that one doesn't even have hooks. That one's been beat to death. But something natural, something ghosty. Maybe it's a true ghost minnow. Maybe it's just something natural like that. Something ghosty. Something with some flash. And then something bold. Now bold can be that springtime craw. Bold can be more of a solid white. It could be chartreuse. It's a miracle I'm not bleeding from everything that's been in that box. Sticky sharp hooks in there. But something ghosty, something with some flash, something bold. And you can fish every situation that you will ever face. It really is that simple. Now, blade baits. I'm only going to get out two. It's that Mega Bass right there, the Dyna Response, and then a Damiki Vault. Let's pick a color. Pick a color, any color. Same deal, you want to fish it in the heavier weights, okay? Heavier the better. So, that's a Vault. That's a Dyna Response. That's a Mega Bass. Those two baits, same exact deal. When do you throw a blade bait versus a lipless? Well, I would say pressure. Okay, so the more the fish get beat up on this technique, the more they shy away from the sound. Now the sound is important. The sound helps them really find it, especially in the murkier water. But vibration is a huge deal to fish, and the blade baits have an insane amount of vibration even though they make no sound. So if I'm showing up to a new fishery, I don't think a lot of people are doing it. I'm throwing that lipless. But if I show up on a fishery where I know people throw it, Chickamauga, Clear Lake in California, places where lipless fishing is famous, you can pick up a blade and go behind people throwing a lipless, and as you saw in that other video, not only can you smash them, you can smash giants, and you can catch a lot of them. Now, how do I decide between these two baits? It's very simple. Now again, there's tons of blade baits. I've got 8 or 10 kinds of blade baits in that box, but I'm always throwing one of these two on this pattern. The Dyna Response is tighter actioned because of all this tail. Okay, so it stays tighter. The Vault is a very wide kick, very aggressive. When you pull, I mean, reel down, lift, when it vibrates up, one vibrates really hard and one's just a tight little vibration. The fish are eating one or the other, and it totally varies day to day. So I will always have both with me. And then again, when it comes to color, blade baits used to come in just very, very basic colors, right? And I think that is part of why they were such a wintertime only bait. They've come so far in recent years, it's crazy. I mean, they look good. They look like plastic baits. So, you know, you've got good bluegill colors. You've got really, really good shad imitating colors. So again, your blades, they're always going to be a little bit chromy, right? Because they're made out of metal. But you can dial it in and choose something that has a really nice look to it. But they're all chrome. They're all fairly similar. So I try not to get too caught up in it. Something that looks like a shad, something that looks like a bluegill, I'm about there, unless it's super muddy and everybody else is throwing a lipless and I still want to throw the blade. And that's when I turn to the bright colors and I throw that instead. But typically, I'm throwing those shad type tones. And that's it for the blade. It's that simple. You can just throw that thing in place of that bottom hopped lipless and you will do great things. Now, more traditional lipless fishing is a big animal. I mean, boxes and boxes and boxes of baits. In the springtime, I essentially throw two types of colors as I'm covering water. I'm throwing craw patterns and I'm throwing shad patterns. I have a lot of chartreuses in my box because sometimes that's a factor, but day in and day out, I'm throwing the white tones, throwing the shad tones, and I'm throwing those reds. When it comes to covering water, you're looking for a couple of things. You're going to want baits that some that will sink a little bit quicker, some that'll sink a little bit slower. The reason why is if I'm going down a steeper bank, I'm going to want a bait that will fish a little bit deeper without me having to go crazy slow. I'm just chucking and winding, but I want to hold a certain depth. And these baits will all sink at different rates. So I'll tell you what, in the video description, because literally it's just boxes and boxes of baits. I mean, we could talk through why each one of these baits made it into my springtime boxes here, or I can make it simple. So down in the description, I'll give you 2 or 3 of my favorite baits for fishing really high in the column. In other words, fishing really shallow, and then a couple for fishing that mid-range. And then for deep, say you're on a reservoir and your fish are holding in 10, 12 foot, but you still want to throw a lipless, that's when you throw those same baits that we would bottom hop. TN70, Lucky Craft LV500, either one of those is phenomenal for throwing it out, letting it sink, and then starting a low retrieve down deep in the water column. They stay down really well. But these other baits, that's where you're going to fish the mid column or that skinny, shallow water, and it makes a huge difference. As far as size, that comes down lake to lake. Most of the time I'm throwing 1/2 ounce type baits because weight and size with a lipless normally go together, with the exception of the TN70 and LV500. Those are very heavy for their size. Just about everything else, that mid-sized bait is a 1/2 ounce. A 3/4 is a lot bigger. You know, that's a Strike King. There's a 3/4 Booyah. They're big profiled baits. What do we have here? And you got like the big Aruku shads. They're big profiles in the 3/4. But I always carry them because once I've caught some fish on a 1/2 ounce, if I'm getting bit here and I've caught a bunch of fish and I'm thinking, man, I wanted to catch a kicker, I go to the bigger size. I throw the 3/4. Now that applies to everything from those baits to like traditional rattle traps, right? You got your 1/2 ounce, and then you got that bigger, that one doesn't even have hooks, but that 3/4 ounce. See the size difference? So if I'm going to put my time in somewhere, I'm putting my time in to 1/2 ounce baits when I'm covering water, but I'll always carry some 3/4 because I can upsize and hopefully get that really big bite that I'm looking for. Now, as an added bonus, if those fish will eat the 3/4, like if your fish are just on and it doesn't seem to matter, you can get bit on whatever you're throwing, 3/4 ounce baits have way bigger hooks. They've always got a size 2 on them. A size 2, your odds of getting that fish in the boat skyrocket. It's just a bigger, stronger, more powerful hook. You can pull harder. The odds of landing the fish are a lot better. And that brings us to something that we should talk about, and that is hook up to land ratio. Because fishing an LV, fishing a lipless, if you listen to traditional thinking, they have a terrible hookup to land ratio. I see people talking about them online and they're like, man, I got on a trap bite, I got on a lipless bite, whatever you want to call it. I hooked a giant and it jumped off, but that's trap fishing. I read that stuff and I think, no, it's not. Your hookup to land ratio should be excellent. And if it's not, it's because you're not using dialed in equipment. Now, if you're on a budget and you've got a medium power rod, you can throw this stuff on it and you'll be okay. You're going to lose some fish. It's the nature of the beast, especially with the LV or the Jackal. I mean, you're talking about a heavy bait on a fairly small hook. Those fish, if your gear's not perfect, will come up, and when they head shake, just the weight of the bait thrashing will rip the hooks out. And you'll lose some of them. And that traditionally has been very disappointing, but it does not have to be that way. We use very dialed in gear, very specific rods. Now, unfortunately, this year, a lot of those rods are hard to get. It's just the nature of the beast. A lot of stuff across the entire industry is sold out, but as a result, we're constantly playing with new rods, different brands, different models, different price points, trying to find rods that will do the job really well. So in the video description, I'll link you my absolute all-time favorite combo, but I'm pretty sure it'll be sold out. They come and go, but it's a tough year. But I will also, at different price points, link you some really good rods that make a huge difference. Essentially what you're looking for in a lipless rod is a noodle. I mean, softer than you think you would want. Other forms of fishing, you want to bulldog those fish. You want to drag them to you. Not a lipless. With a lipless rod, if you want to land the absolute maximum number of fish, you want a rod that when you hit them, just completely folds over. It's just strong enough to put the hooks in them. Once you've got them hooked up, just let that fish dig, let them pull, let them fight. But with that rod all folded up, it just sits there and just absorbs everything that they do. And it's a huge difference. I'm talking when Tim and I get a big one hooked up on a lipless, it doesn't even occur to us that they might come off. When they do, it's a complete and utter shock, as opposed to people that talk about losing all the big ones that they hook on a lipless. It does not have to be that way. Springtime is an awesome time to get out on the water. It's an amazing time to throw the lipless. We know that. It's also an amazing time to get those blade baits back out and keep sticking fish that way too. Whether you're covering water, whether you're hopping bottom on secondary spots as the big ones are moving in, you can catch a lot of fish. You can catch giant fish this spring. I hope this information helps you. Again, it was a lot. It's a ton of baits, but in the description, I'll break it out. So you can think, well, my lake is pretty shallow. I typically fish 2 to 4 foot of water. Look at those shallow baits. And then remember, something ghosty, something shiny, and something bold. That simple. And I'll give you some of my favorite colors, but it's that simple. You guys that are thinking, I fish all sorts of different things, get those mid-size baits. Guys that want to start hopping bottom, it's very specific and you can dial it in and it will work for you. It has worked for us all over this country. It was working for us down in Florida in the grass. People down there often overlook a lot of treble hooked baits because of their grass, but we were able to catch lipless fish down there too, had a blast doing it. It works everywhere. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.